with news from across the Federation, spanning the region and covering the globe. This is the Kiss FM SKN News Now Evening Edition, your one true source for news. And now your presenter.
Good evening, I'm Ebony Brandon. Today is Wednesday, it's the 8th of February 2017. This is the SKN News Now Evening Edition. In the headlines this evening, nationally, former Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas, is troubled over the $9 million price hike for the construction of a new cruise pier at Port Zante. Regionally, Liat has announced more cuts to its travel routes. And internationally, the United Nations is seeking more than $2 billion in aid to avert famine in Yemen. We've got the details of these stories and more straight ahead in this evening's edition of SKN News Now. The Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas is convinced that there is something fishy about new plans for the construction of a second cruise pier at Port Zante. According to the former Prime Minister, under his administration, which initiated plans for the construction of the second pier, the cost of the project was estimated at $32 million at that time. 2 years later, under the Unity government, the cost has escalated by some $9 million.
There are machinations surrounding the second pier project at Port Zante. And such machinations stink to the pit of hell. The St. Kitts and Nevis Prime Minister and the Minister of Works and the Attorney General, together with the entire cabinet, seem to have authored a deal with the Canadian company which in the media has been described as defrauding the people of St. Kitts and Nevis of $9 million. The pier project, which cost $32 million under Labour, is now mysteriously reaching $41 million. And it is assumed that the poor people of St. Kitts and Nevis will have to pay.
Dr. Douglas is also expressing serious concern over the proposed deal between the Unity government and the Canada-based JV Driver Group for the construction of the pier. He says from the information which is available, the deal offers no protection to taxpayers in the event of cost overruns. This, according to Douglas, is very unlike the deal which was to have been entered under his administration, as his government ensured that the best financial interest of taxpayers would have been served.
The Bazarian Group, which offered a bid for the pier proposal, provided strictly project funding without the need for sovereign guarantee. That means there would be no liens on our lands or our funds held in our national treasury. But the current Unity government deal, the deal of the concoction government, requires a government guarantee, including coverage of the extra $9 million. The Canadian company, JV Driver Group, is well known for mega cost overruns. Just check the BVI project, where there were cost overruns of $48 million on an initial project costing $35 million. And so the question arises, what is it that will happen to this extra $9 million. It is in the media that it is going to be shared. I don't know, but the people of St. Kitts and Nevis deserve to know.
Given the reputation of the JV Driver Group for huge cost overruns, Dr. Douglas says of the view that the people must put pressure on the government to postpone plans for the pair until a better deal is negotiated.
Because when you examine the track record of this company, it suggests that we the people need to rethink this project under this particular proposal before we allow our government to proceed on this extortion of public funds as has been described in the media.
That was Leader of the Opposition, the Right Honourable Dr. Denzil Douglas. Meanwhile, Senator the Honourable Nigel Carty has highlighted the convenient timing of the establishment of a private business by Government Minister Honourable Ian Patches Liburd. Earlier today, Senator Carty observed that it appears to be the policy of the government to condone the inappropriate and questionable actions of persons holding top positions in public office.
In his 65 years on this earth, Patches Liburd never saw it fit to form one company. Not even to sell Jawbone Breaker or Sweetie. But he gets into government, and all of a sudden, this brilliant idea hits him that he could form a company. And instead of the government denouncing that kind of action, and said to the people and said to the minister that this looks like corruption and nobody who holds the office you hold has any business opening and operating or even thinking about operating a company of that type in St. Kitts and Nevis. But what does the government do? The government goes into its cabinet meeting and basically applauds Patches Liburd and puts out a press release saying that he hasn't done anything wrong. And when you think about it, for all that is happening across the government, in government offices, in state corporations, really, maybe it is true that that kind of activity is a run-of-the-mill activity in the context of the government and what the government tolerates and what the government practices.
The senator pointed out that the Team Unity administration's unwise approval of Minister Liburt's new business enterprise is not surprising, however, as top government officials have engaged in similar activities.
When the nephew of the Prime Minister or a Minister of Government, who until recently, and perhaps still is, a gardener and butler for the Prime Minister, is seeming to have control of major government projects such as road construction projects throughout the country, one has to understand that Timothy Harris and those in government with him believe that this is just some government of a banana republic that believes that once it gets into office and has political power, really has the ability to do whatever it wants and whatever it will with the resources of the people. People are paying their hard-earned money in taxes to this government. And this government is using the people's money as it feels like, putting money into whose pocket it feels like, giving projects to whomsoever it feels like, brothers and cousins and sisters. And even to this day, has failed to put in place the things that they said they would put in place within their first 100 days in government. Well, I just want to say to the public that it's now almost 800 days that they've been in government. 730-something days now they've been in government. These are the kinds of things that lead people to have the permanent impression of the government. After all you've been hearing about Timothy Harris and his many businesses, which only recently he has begun to deny because somebody has told him that that notion is undermining his credibility as a prime minister and politician and undermining his government. And so recently he has begun to try to push back on the issue. Well, you and I know that Timothy Harris isn't going to perhaps put any business in his own name. But if you have a business in your family's name, in a friend's name, in an accountant's name, and I can call names, or in a lawyer's office, it is the same thing.
The creation of a Labor Management Information System, or LMIS, will assist in facilitating free movement of artisans and reduce workplace tension. This is the belief of Minister of Labour, Honourable Vance Emery, commenting on the objective of the LMIS workshop, which is now carrying on at the OTI Hotel. Mr. Emery noted that it will acquaint participants with the processes involved in establishing a single regional labour management information system.
What we are establishing through this seminar today is how to establish the labour management information system, and that is to acquire and establish a database, a data system, which would be available to inform all of the countries as to the availability of labour, the availability of employment as well, because the two things must go hand in hand. And this will facilitate the movement of labour where it is required to facilitate the CSME and the implementation thereof. It is important for us that our people understand what the agreements which have been made by our government in respect of the freedom of movement, so that we do not have the ongoing tension between non-nationals who are CARICOM members, who are holders, who qualify to move freely and to be employed, because this will minimize the requirement for tension and contention in the workplace or on the media as it continues to unfold from day to day.
Addressing specifically workplace tensions resulting from the presence of migrant workers, the Labour Minister said this occurs largely as a result of public misunderstanding of the CARICOM single market and economy's requirements and provisions.
Well, I think because people don't fully understand and have not been fully acquainted with the provisions of the CSME over the years, this has been a very big challenge, where decisions are made as heads of government at the different agencies of CARICOM, but there has been no dissemination of the specifics and the details for people within the community to have a full appreciation. So therefore, when our citizens see someone from another CARICOM country come into the region and is employed, they're saying they come to take over jobs, whereas there is that understanding which has been signed on to since 1989, and subsequent adjustments to the Treaty of Chaguaramas to allow for the movement of skills, movement of goods, and so on. But there's still that lack of appreciation, of understanding of the meaning and the impact of those agreements. And so when someone sees a non-national of St. Kitts and Nevis, but a CARICOM national who has an entitlement based on the agreements which we've signed on to, that is what creates the tension, because they don't understand what we have signed on to over the years. And I think it is an effort to remove those gray areas, that misunderstanding, why trainings like this are important. And I'm hoping that year on year we can see a greater understanding and a greater appreciation of where we are in the CARICOM arrangement.
The Labour Management Information System workshop at the Ocean Terrace Inn concludes tomorrow. Former Deputy Premier of Nevis, Hensley Daniel, has come out again as a strong advocate of federal youth upliftment. On Tuesday, Mr. Daniel said that young people need to be allowed the opportunity to develop necessary skills and acquire training in order to become productive citizens.
We believe that the country is short of the skills that are needed, and the young people have to be given the chance to develop those skills. I believe as a politician in a country with a history of slavery and colonialism, I believe that I have an obligation as a parliamentarian, as a minister of government. I believe I have an obligation to provide opportunities for skills training for the young people. And what that does, EK, it gives them an opportunity to look away from crime. It gives them an opportunity to raise their self-esteem. And most importantly, gives them an opportunity to earn their own money. So they don't have to spend time with robbing people and trying to break into people's homes. And I think one of the great failings of this government in Nevis, the present government, is its inability to do just this.
Daniel, a member of the Nevis Reformation Party and the island's former youth minister, also detailed ways in which the NRP, while in government, had ensured that young people had a strong voice regarding their governance.
We don't take the traditional view of saying that young men and women are the youth are the men and women of tomorrow, because every time tomorrow comes, they tell you of tomorrow. So you never get to be the chance. You never get the chance to be the actual men and women and to play a leading role in the country. I just want to remind the public that while the NRP was in government, 2010 to 2006 to 2012, that for the first time in the history of St. Kitts and Nevis, and also for the first time across the Caribbean, EK, we insisted and ensured and actually did put young people to serve on the boards of our statutory corporations and encourage the private sector to do likewise. And so that was a significant way of saying to young people, look, we're not just talking about you, but we are actually giving you a chance. And we said each board should have somebody under 25 years of age. You know, we had a problem just talking to people, talking down to young people. So we sought actively to engage them.
Bleak. This is how the Nevis Reformation Party's Corey Tyson is describing the job market school leavers must face this year. The St. George's constituency candidate made the observation as he lamented the unpromising job hunt, which awaits droves of high school and college graduates later this year.
You know, I was sitting down and calling out, last week, and it dawned on me that in a few months we have excess of 200 students being dumped on the streets. In combination, when you combine the amount of students that are graduating from Gingerland Secondary, Charlestown Secondary, and the sixth form college. Yeah. We have in excess of 200 students.
Okay.
And we have no jobs for them.
Well, it's a new paradigm shift. Probably jobs would be created over on St. Kitts.
But that's not good enough.
I know that's not good enough, but if we are to look at what is going on in this present day, the shift is St. Kitts. How do we get back in doing things for Nevis?
One of the arguments vigorously posited by the Nevis Reformation Party against the Concerned Citizens movement is that the CCM has taken Nevis backward by increasing the island's level of dependency on the federal government. Still to come in regional developments this evening, Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister is under the gun for comments he made about victims of domestic violence. Stay with us. SKN News Now continues in a moment. Trinidad and Tobago's Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley is under fire for comments he made recently about victims of domestic violence. Dr. Rowley said while government will do all it can to help victims, it's ultimately their responsibility to make wise decisions about the partners they choose.
Prime Minister Dr. Keith Rowley is under the gun for statements made at a public meeting last night about victims of domestic violence. Dr. Keith Rowley said at least 1/3 of the murders committed in recent time is related to domestic violence and said protection orders have been put in place to deal with this. However, that has caused some concern.
1/3 of the murders in recent times are domestic violence or domestic issues. And then that you call on the Prime Minister to do something about crime. I'm not in your bedroom, I'm not in your choice of men. You have a responsibility to determine who you associate with and know when to get out, and the state will try to help.
Opposition Senator Khadija Amin took to Facebook this morning and said the statement was a devaluing act, and in his words, he discounted the abusive maltreatment against women, making them responsible for the horrors being committed against them. Meanwhile, the Single Fathers Association has also expressed its surprise by the statement made by the Prime Minister. The group's president, Ronald Fields, said domestic crime is the direct result of people suffering from a lack of emotional intelligence. He said people who have lost their way emotionally find it a lot harder to make intelligent decisions. He said one does not need to get into people's bedrooms, but create a space or avenue for them to get out what is hidden in their bedrooms. The National Solidarity Assembly is joining the call for an extraordinary sitting of Parliament to discuss the crime situation. It said, however, it must be a sitting with a difference, in that it must not be an adversarial debate to score political points, as much as it must be a discussion among parliamentarians, the people's representatives, about the best way to deal with the escalating and almost out-of-control crime situation. The party's leader, Nirvan Maharaj, says it must not be where the opposition opposes for opposing sake or the government imposes for imposing sake. The NSA says it must be a coming together of ideas in full view and witness of the people who would have elected these members to office.
Antigua-based air carrier Liat has announced additional cuts to several routes as of next month as part of its efforts to achieve greater profitability and improve efficiency. Flights to and from the United States Virgin Islands and between Dominica and Guadeloupe are among those to be axed. The airline said in a release on Tuesday that effective March 1st, 2017, it will stop flying to St. Croix and the service to St. Thomas will end on March 14th. The release also noted that the airline will suspend its Guadeloupe to Dominica route on March 2nd and will instead operate a return Antigua to Guadeloupe flight. The suspensions follow a route review aimed at ensuring the airline only flies on commercially viable routes. The Chief Commercial Officer Lloyd Carswell said the change means more time added to schedules at airports throughout the region and the removal of some of the underperforming routes. According to Carswell, once Liat has achieved operational integrity, the company may consider reinstating St. Thomas on a seasonal basis. The news comes ahead of a planned meeting between regional trade unions and the management of Liat on Friday. The restructuring of routes is among several issues down for discussion. Finally, in regional developments this evening, the Bahamian Minister of Education, Jerome Fitzgerald, has responded to opposition Free National Movement claims that students who attend mixed-sex schools do not perform as well as students at schools separated by gender. The minister said the rationale for the outdated practice is not backed by fact and asserted that the instruction given to students is what is vitally important.
Research shows that separating boys and girls does not improve their academic output. In fact, at the end of the day, it's actually the instruction that boys, the boys have that improves. And so it's a question of the teacher understanding that boys learn differently and making sure that the instruction that is given is geared towards boys being receptive to that. And so there's something that's called differentiation or differentiated teaching, and that's really where we should focus our attention, and that's where we have been focusing our attention. I invite him if he wants. I had arranged for a meeting for him to come in and meet with the director and the PS and those who are responsible for the shared vision for Education 2030 so they could properly educate him on what's happening within the public school system.
Still to come this evening in international developments, scientists hope a new medical device being tested will be able to smell diseases in patients. We have the details in just a moment. The United Nations appealed today for $2.1 billion to provide food and other life-saving assistance to 12 million people in Yemen who face the threat of famine after 2 years of war, as there's confusion over Yemen's position on U.S. ground operations to fight al-Qaeda militants. Mia Womersley reports.
Fishermen can't fish, farmers can't farm, civil servants don't get paid. So the ability for them to cope with that crisis has been exacerbated by the conflict. And so what you have is people having to make life and death decisions. Do you feed your child or your children, or do you pay for medical treatment for the sick child? And that's a daily call for many families.
Geologists have warned of powerful earthquakes over the next few years. Chile, which is frequently hit by tremors, is among the countries in seismically active regions preparing for potential disasters. Lucia Newman reports from Santiago.
The dynamic nature of our planet has created mountains, oceans, and earthquakes. No country knows that better than Chile, universally considered the world's most seismic country. It's where two of the strongest earthquakes ever registered have occurred.
We're always going to have earthquakes because along our entire 4,000 kilometers, the Nazca Plate is pushing under the South American Plate.
That's why Chile is a perfect laboratory for engineers to develop innovative methods designed to make buildings earthquake-proof.
There are like different types of devices. One of them is like rubber cake that has like layers of rubber and steel, but it's very flexible in the horizontal direction. So you can put all this big building on top. It's very stiff in the vertical direction, but on the horizontal direction it's very flexible, so as to the ground can move and the building will stay.
For very tall buildings, they've developed energy dissipation devices, like these, placed in between each story.
You let the energy of the earthquake goes into the building, and you use some devices that capture that deformation and dissipates energy.
But while Chile's building codes and engineering methods score high marks, it's not prepared enough. I'm standing on top of the San Ramon fault line in Santiago, where some of the city's newest and most expensive homes are being built every day. Unlike the earthquakes produced by the Nazca Plate, this type of fault line tends to lie dormant for hundreds and sometimes thousands of years, creating a false sense of security. But when this fault line finally does become active, it produces an earthquake that is far closer to the surface and therefore far more destructive, especially in urban areas. Geologists warn that since the year 2000, our planet has been experiencing an earthquake cluster of unpredictable duration. There are earthquake warning devices, like this one exhibited at a recent technology fair in Santiago. But experts say the only way to really prepare is to substantially improve building codes to withstand the impact of shallow fault line earthquakes. Or better still, avoid building altogether in places like this.
A Nanos device, which can diagnose 17 diseases, including cancer and Parkinson's, based on smelling a patient's breath, paves the way for quick, non-invasive, and affordable early detection, according to its Israeli developers. Stuart McDill has more.
The future of early diagnosis of disease could be this simple, according to a team of researchers in Israel. The Nanos, as they call it, can differentiate between 17 types of diseases with a single sniff, identifying the so-called smelly compounds in anything from cancers to Parkinson's. Nanos uses artificially intelligent nano-array sensors to analyse the data obtained from receptors that smell the patient's breath. Several companies are now trying to commercialise the technology and encourage its use in healthcare systems, or see it incorporated into your smartphone.
And that wraps up this evening's international developments. Now for a recap of our headlines this evening. Nationally, former Prime Minister of the Right, Honorable Dr. Denzel Douglas, is troubled over the $9 million price hike for the construction of a new cruise pier at Port Zante. Regionally, LIAT has announced more cuts to its travel routes. And internationally, the United Nations is seeking more than $2 billion in aid to avert famine in Yemen. Still to come this evening, Sports Zone. Stay with us. Tonight in Sports Zone, Japan is tapping into recycled mobile phones to create the next Olympic medals. We'll be back with the details. Olympic organizers are soon expected to unveil their plan to be the first games to award medals made entirely from recycled materials. Medals at the Tokyo 2020 Olympic and Paralympic Games could be made from materials extracted from old mobile phones. Wayne Hay has more.
It seems technology is moving faster than ever, and that means piles of electronic or e-waste are growing higher. This is the largest tech recycling company in Japan, specializing in mobile phones. It calls itself an urban mine because its main purpose is to extract precious metals from the phones.
In small electric equipment, including mobile phones, there are a lot of those metals. If we could efficiently recover the metal, we thought we could stop relying on imports someday. With that goal in mind, we started this business.
And it's really just beginning. It's estimated only about 20% of mobile phones in Japan are recycled. Most remain unused at home because people aren't sure what to do with them. In many countries, they're thrown out with other rubbish.
A recent United Nations study into e-waste found that the volume of discarded electronics in East and Southeast Asia increased by an average of 63% in 5 years.
It's a big problem, but it's also a major resource. The organisers of Tokyo 2020 want to tap into it and have all their medals for the Olympics and Paralympics made from recycled small electronics. The idea gained momentum when a group of Tokyo students who are interested in the environment started an online petition. They want to use the plan to promote recycling of e-waste long term.
We want to make the medals using materials recovered by many citizens, but we are also looking beyond that. We have recycling laws in Japan, but they're not effective, so we want an ongoing recycling resource. So this is a good opportunity.
The International Olympic Committee states that a gold medal must have a minimum 6 grams of gold. The rest is mainly silver. There's around 0.03 of a gram of gold in the average mobile phone, so that means they'll need about 300,000 phones just to extract enough gold. Then there's the silver and bronze. It means these people are likely to be kept busy for the next 3 years leading up to the Games, and, it's hoped, way beyond.
In golf now, 14-time major winner Tiger Woods says he will never feel great again because of the number of injuries he suffered during his career. Woods, 41, pulled out of the Dubai Desert Classic before the second round this month because of a back spasm. He only returned to action in December after 2 back operations. Woods' first return to competitive action after a 15-month layoff came in December at the Hero World Challenge, an 18-man tournament in the Bahamas, and he finished 15th at the PGA Tour event. He still has hopes, however, of competing in the Masters at Augusta from April 6th to 9th. Woods, who has won 79 titles on the PGA Tour, has not won a tournament anywhere since 2013. His title drought in major championships, however, dates back to 2008. And finally, this evening in cricket, Indian cricketer Mohit Alawat hit an extraordinary 72-ball triple century in a local 2020 match in Delhi. The 21-year-old hit 39 sixes, including 5 off the final over as he posted around 300, and his team, Mavi, finished on 416 for 2. His total dwarfs the top-tier record of 175 scored by Chris Gayle in the 2013 Indian Premier League. And that wraps things up for us here this evening. Thanks again so much for tuning in to tonight's edition of SKN News Now. On behalf of the entire team here at KISS FM, I'm Ebony Brandon, wishing you a pleasant evening.